Hello, Nash. I'm Nick Giorgetti.
And I'm Pavle Djokic, and today we're honored to welcome Congressman-elect Conor to NASH.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Sure thing.
All right. I guess one of the first things I would like to ask you is, what is one of the most important issues that face us here in the United States?
I think one of the most important issues overall is just the incredible gridlock and divisiveness that we have in Washington, D.C. I mean, before I ever ran for office, my perception of politics, like a lot of people, is that you just had these two camps who were so hopelessly divided. It seems like over almost every issue. I mean, there used to be kind of the basic blocking and tackling of government that people would agree to, and then there were others that they disagreed, but now it just seems like partisanship has really infected every issue you could possibly talk about. And so my hope is that with a lot of new people running for office on this year, on both sides, but primarily Democrats, we can bring back a spirit of true bipartisanship and compromise so that we can get things done, not just for its own sake, but so that we can actually pass bills and take action on some of the big problems that we have.
Now, do you believe with this kind of change, the Democratic Party needs new leadership? Or is the current leadership, like, suffice to say, all right?
We absolutely need new leadership. I mean, I think we need new leadership on both sides. You know, it's funny, Paul Ryan has been the Speaker of the House for several years now. The Republicans have been in control of Congress. And all you hear from the other side is about Nancy Pelosi. And it's like, look, leadership starts at the very top. And I think that Paul Ryan has completely failed to do anything for us here in Western Pennsylvania. And so I think that whether the Democrats retake the House or not, we need newer, younger leaders on top of both parties who are just committed to changing the way things have been getting done.
Now, you mentioned Western Pennsylvania. Do you believe there's any issues that specifically affect us here in Western PA that you can help tackle in Washington, D.C.?
I really do. One of the reasons I got in this race in the first place is because I had worked for about 3 years on heroin trafficking cases and heroin overdose death cases. And I just saw firsthand the devastation that has caused in our whole area, both for the young men and women who pass away and the family members who are left behind, who spend the whole rest of their lives dealing with that tragedy. And it's really a failure of government. I mean, we have not set up the treatment options to get people in and really cure them of this brain disease that addiction is, and we haven't done enough in law enforcement either. So that is something that's unique to Western Pennsylvania. We have had really high death rates here compared to other parts of the country. There are other things having to do with infrastructure, you know, rebuilding the roads and bridges, and here, because we have the three rivers, the locks and dams, that would put a lot of people to work, and it would really help our businesses. You know, many of your students have probably followed in the news how we're trying to get Amazon to come to Pittsburgh for the second headquarters. Well, if you're a company like Amazon that moves goods in trucks from warehouses to airports and back and forth, we need to do a lot better than we've done to make sure that our business environment here is the best in the country.
So you've had like a decent career before coming into politics. What do you think your biggest professional accomplishment is thus far in your life?
Becoming an officer in the Marines was just the honor of a lifetime. I mean, I'll never forget how it felt to stand there and be sworn in the first time after having completed boot camp. And I got to know the best men and women that I had ever met in doing that. And it's something, you know, Marines in particular, we're always Marines, no matter where you go in life and what you end up doing. And it is it's a privilege and also kind of a responsibility that you carry with you to always lead from the front and try to live that same kind of life no matter where you go.
In light of all of the recent mass shootings that have taken place in schools, what is your stance on regulating guns?
We cannot tolerate a society anymore where we have these tragedies happen at our school and Congress does nothing. I mean, how many is it going to take before these guys even pass a bill on something like background checks? So at the same time that this has happened, we've seen a budget presented in Washington, D.C. that cuts funding for school emergency response, cuts funding for mental health counselors in schools, and I'm opposed to that. I think we need to double down on those sources of funding to make schools physically safer, you know, when it comes to the types of barriers or security measures that you have, where people sit inside the building. I mean, I can't tell you how many administrative assistants I've talked to who are physically afraid based on where they sit related to the door. So we've got to take action on those things. When it comes to firearms specifically, what I believe is that we have to seize the broad common ground that we know exists. So again, we have this situation in Washington where people are so far apart and they're so divided over everything, especially guns. I mean, we know that guns have a unique history in our country, and that people feel very passionately about them on both sides of this debate. But pretty much everyone agrees that you should have a background check. It should be thorough. It should have the information in it that it needs, whether it's about someone's criminal record or about their mental health history. And I can tell you firsthand, our system doesn't have that right now. I mean, all the time, people are falling through the cracks when they've committed crimes before and they're not reported. That's what happened in the Texas shooting. That happened with Dylan Roof down in South Carolina. And the mental health situation is even worse. I mean, it's hard to get the mental health records into the national background check system the way it's supposed to be. So there's a lot of work to be done there. We have to close every loophole. We have to stop the fact that there are no background checks for internet sales and for sales that take place at gun shows. There is a bill pending, hopefully, that will allow us to do that. So that's where I think the work begins. And again, we have to start from a position of strength there. People on both sides are saying they agree with it. The president has said he agrees with it. Let's get that done. Is it the first step of many? Probably. I mean, we've talked about a few of them here. But I think the biggest thing is not to allow another one of these tragedies to happen without us getting this work done that we all know needs to be done.
So more specifically, a big issue in our, on the topic of gun control is the idea of assault weapons and assault rifles. And many people on the Democratic Party are heavily in favor of maybe regulating these guns or even banning them, while people on the right and in the Republican Party thinks this infringes on constitutional rights. Where would you stand if you had to vote on a bill that would possibly infringe on some kind of constitutional rights of this?
Well, I mean, even the way that you asked the question shows how difficult of an issue that particular ban is going to be. And people have already retreated into their camps on this issue. Regardless of who's right or wrong, I think we need to redirect ourselves back to the fact that there is so much work to do on fixing and improving the background check system, on funding it right, on making sure that the people who use it day to day are actually using it and enforcing the law when they don't. Because a lot of firearm store owners are pretty casual with the way that happens, and that those guns get in the hands of criminals. So I'm not in favor of an assault weapons ban right now. I've said that plenty of times, and people disagree with me on that. Many people within my own party. I understand. But let's call our attention to where we all agree. I mean, so many people who were at the march this weekend all agree that we should support closing the loopholes and fixing the background check system. And I think realistically this year, that's something we can get done.
All right.
Good. So I'd just like to talk for a bit. So what was winning your most recent election? Like how good did that feel?
It felt great, but mainly because when you're the candidate, you are uniquely aware of how you're only in that position because of the efforts of so many people, and I just really felt honored to be the one that got to walk up on that stage that night and tell our whole team in the room and everywhere that you did it. I mean, we knocked something like 250,000 doors in this campaign.
That's amazing.
We made 450,000 phone calls. Our average contribution, raising the money for all those commercials, was $33. I mean, this was truly a grassroots thing, and the way that I think we all think American government should work. And so I was just happy that that was what triumphed, and all the big money and the dark money on the other side that tried to steal this election from our people was not successful.
So with your recent win, do you think that kind of foreshadows in the next upcoming general midterm elections? Does that foreshadow a larger kind of democratic blue wave that people are talking about? Do you think that your win has something to do with that?
I really don't know. The one thing that I have stayed laser focused on are the concerns of our people here in Western Pennsylvania and what we need to ensure that people's jobs stay here and that we have better jobs in the future and that we preserve things like Social Security and Medicare. We take on the student debt crisis and the heroin epidemic. And so we have really focused on those problems, and I think we have pretty good answers to them as they apply to people in Western Pennsylvania. I'm not so sure what candidates are talking about in other races around the country, and my instinct would be whichever candidate works the hardest, reaches out to actual people and doesn't rely on all this dark money and talks about the problems that are most important there will be successful, and that may be someone from either party.
Yeah. So a big issue here at like the high school level and for a lot of younger people in general across the country, no matter where you are, is civic engagement.
Absolutely.
A lot of people, once they turn 18, have no real motivation to register to vote, no real motivation to kind of look around what's going on in their country, kind of at their own front door and beyond. What do you say to all these young people, students, college students? Why should they care about politics?
Because we have been given such a great gift in this country. I mean, to be born as Americans or to become Americans in the course of our lifetimes, to me it's the greatest honor that you could ever have. And an American can walk all around the world with their head held high, knowing that we are such a special country in the history of the world, and that we are the greatest country in the world. And to treat that casually, or to not carry your share of the burden or your share of the load, I think it's just wrong in light of the sacrifices that it took to get there. I mean, people died in wars. People had sit-ins and marches for civil rights in this country. And so many sacrifices have been made by so many different people throughout our history that have allowed us to get to where we are today. And I think it's up to us to carry the torch of the next generation.
All right. What is a normal day for you like?
Well, I don't know that one of the great things about this is every day is pretty different, and so you have to stay flexible. But typically, I'm out in the car almost all day, every day. That's how it should be. I try to visit people in their VFWs and in their town halls, in their senior centers, on their street, and even at their doorstep when I can. And that's how I learn the most. I mean, people will tell you things in the comfort of their own homes about their lives and their histories, their experience with things like Social Security and Medicare, or really serious illnesses, or job losses, or things that are just tragic and terrible. And that's when you really feel, wow, I've got to do something about this. This is why we're working so hard. So my goal is to really be out there every single day.
So, back when you were our age in high school, what did you aspire to be? Like, did you ever foresee yourself getting into politics?
I don't know. I did have some politics in my family that made me interested in all this stuff. I knew I wanted to be in public service in one form or another. And so my first step out of school was to become a Marine officer, and then I came back here and was a prosecutor. And I kind of thought I could stay in that for a long time. I really loved those two jobs, and I was proud to do them. And the thing with our former representative came along when he dropped out, and all of a sudden there was an opening, and that changed the way I was looking at things.
Okay.
So, with the special election, did you immediately think that this is your chance, or did somebody kind of, were you inspired by your family maybe to jump into the election? Like, what really inspired you to kind of take a huge leap and run as a Democratic candidate in this party that won so heavily?
Right. Well, I mean, I think we all know that we're living in very unique times right now. And from my work in the U.S. Attorney's Office, especially on the heroin cases, I just had a sense of how severe the problems are that are facing us here in Western PA. I mean, many of these cases I worked on, the people who died were from small towns where I had played basketball in high school, and they were around my age, and they should have been serving with me in the military or working out on one of our job sites instead of being consumed by this addiction. And so when Representative Murphy resigned and went down in an embarrassing scandal, I just thought, that's not good enough. I mean, this is my hometown, and like I told you, Marines try to lead from the front. So I just jumped in. I was inspired by my grandfather and my uncle, who have done politics as well, but I also have a brother and sister who are teachers, and my mom's a nurse, and so I had a feel for how there are so many people out there every day working hard to make this country run right, and I just wanted to try to be a part of getting it back on track.
Yeah. So what would you do to help combat the heroin and opioid crisis here, since that's quite bad here?
Yeah. I mean, one of the thing is that there's kind of three components to this problem. So there's the law enforcement part that I worked on, going after the biggest traffickers and people who are selling the product that's killing people. And it's heroin, but more and more now it's fentanyl, which is even stronger. That's a form of the drug that's made in labs in China, and it's so potent that one dose can kill almost anyone. And we have to get a lot tougher on those traffickers and on the places where the drug is coming from, whether it's China or Mexico. But Where I think we have the biggest opportunity to make an impact quickly is when it comes to treatment. Because I have just seen time and time again, there are people suffering from addiction and their families who finally make the step to say, we need to get treatment, we need to change our lives, and there's nowhere there for them to go. I mean, there's literally no room at the inn. And we had times where we arrested people and we wanted to send them to treatment instead of jail, and none of the centers could take them because they were full. So we need to build more treatment facilities, we need to put beds in them, and people need to be able to stay there for a longer period. You know, right now, a lot of times you can only stay for 30 days, but the experts will tell you it takes 90 days at least. And then you need treatment after you leave for years sometimes, because the brain has been just changed by this horrible, horrible addiction. And it's expensive, it's gonna be tough, but there's no limit to the price we should pay to save our young people. I mean, we're losing 60,000 people a year at this point. I mean, so if you take that out 5 years to when you guys are finishing up college and entering the workforce, we could lose 300,000 people. I mean, if a foreign country was killing 300,000 of our people, we would move heaven and earth to stop it, and I think we have to take that same attitude with this problem.
So you mentioned the problem with fentanyl and people kind of distributing that within Western Pennsylvania. There's been some suggestions from the White House to take extremely harsh measures against drug dealers and distributors. Where do you stand on these kind of penalties, leading up even to like the death penalty?
Right. I'm not in favor of the death penalty, and I think with respect to most crimes, it hasn't really shown that it's as much of a deterrence as just constant prosecuting and investigating more and more criminals and giving them very serious sentences. I mean, I have been in favor of heavy, lengthy sentences for the biggest traffickers, and that's what we need to do a better job of. Is, you know, there are these guys who make millions of dollars a year and even more from the trade in fentanyl and heroin. And they're hard to catch. I mean, you really have to follow them for months or even years sometimes to build the case. That was what we did at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I know we could do more of it, but it takes more resources and investment by the government.
Definitely.
So what is your stance on marijuana?
Medical marijuana in particular.
Right. I think there's a lot of promise there to take care of people that are sick and do it more effectively than current prescription drugs. I mean, I've just heard so many stories of people tell me about their children who have seizures, and cannabis oil costs about $40 and treats it a lot better than a prescription drug cocktail that costs $400 and has all kind of side effects. So doctors are telling me that, parents are telling me that. It makes sense that we should have laws that allow us to do that very careful form of medical marijuana treatment in accordance with what doctors say, and see what we learn from that. You know, let's go one step at a time on this one.
So at the federal level, would you support perhaps even recreational marijuana?
I'm not there. I think that we have a lot we need to learn about how cannabis and cannabis oil can be used medically in the right hands, while continuing our overall efforts at preventing drug abuse in the first place. And I think that's an area where we really can do a lot more than we're doing right now. You know, here in Western Pennsylvania, for example, Children's Hospital is leading the way on a new system to identify risk factors in kids as early as age 9 that show they might become addicted or abusive of a number of drugs and alcohol. And if they're identified at an early age, they're not blacklisted or anything like that, but they're sent opportunities to get mental health and behavioral treatment early to try to prevent that from happening. And if they get better federal funding for that program, they can study it and they can evaluate it over time and see if it works and see if other hospitals and medical systems can start using it as well. So I'd like to see us focus there so that nobody is abusing any kind of drug or alcohol long term.
All right, so you mentioned that you were actually interested in basketball when you were younger. Have you been following the recent March Madness?
You know, I really have not. I feel kind of embarrassed about it. Yeah, it's just been difficult to. We have had our own version of March Madness. That's a good play. You've got a feature in this business, kid. That's good. But yeah, I know that Villanova has advanced, and I went to school out in Philly and tend to root for some of the old Big East schools. So I'll probably be pulling for them, I think.
All right. Agree to disagree, but it's all right.
Yeah. Who are you rooting for?
I was for Duke, but I guess now I'm just pulling for either Loyola Chicago or Michigan.
Yeah, so Loyola Chicago's still alive.
Yeah, which is crazy.
I do think I'd love to see them win as well. You got to root for the underdog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is your favorite lunch meat?
Ooh, wow. So I'll tell you, I'm a pretty healthy eater, so I'd probably have to go with turkey.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's respectable.
All right.
Respectable.
The national bird of America, right? I mean, I know it's the bald eagle officially,
Yeah.
but Ben Franklin wanted it to be the turkey.
Exactly.
So.
Fair enough.
All right, so there's a lot of young people who are not interested, but there's also a lot of kids who are interested in politics in the high school level. Do you have any advice for, because obviously you're one of the younger faces in Washington, you'll be a fresh face. Any advice for kids in high school or college looking to maybe advance and making a change in their country?
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, somebody told me a quote by a theologian named Howard Thurman, and he said, "Don't do what you think the world needs. Do what will make you come alive," because what the world really needs is people to come alive.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes people think there's a certain route they have to follow to get to where they want to go, whether it's in politics or anywhere else. And you should get advice from people about the steps you need to take, but the biggest thing is find out where your true passion lies and what you really want to do. And even if that doesn't get paid well, or even if it's difficult, go for it. Because you never want to look back and feel like you missed a chance, and you'll become a better person through that experience, I think.
So, since the prom is here in about the next month, do you have any advice for the men in this school who may be having a hard time trying to find a date?
Right, man. You know, I just think that this was not my strength, to be honest with you. So,
it's not mine either.
yeah, I know. I was a single guy for a long time for exactly this reason. But less is more. You know, I think that era of mystery and, a few very well-chosen words when it's time to make the initial ask, and then a long period of silence.
Okay.
You know, I think it's hard for people to say no sometimes if you have the confidence to stand there quietly. That might be the, speak softly and carry a big stick,
Yep.
as we
It
say.
can be
So
ideology for your entire life, really.
that's
Yeah.
right.
So, in the recent election, obviously a big aspect is going around, talking to different people, meeting different families, and a big part of people's families is their babies. So what I would like to ask you is, if you had to estimate the number of babies' heads you've kissed in your recent election campaign,
Right.
where would you put that number?
Okay, so in terms of actual literal kissing of babies, probably only a few dozen.
A few dozen.
And however, the selfie I think has kind of like eclipsed the kissing of babies
Okay.
in day-to-day political interaction. So, I mean, the number of selfies that I've taken is got to be in the tens of thousands at this point, many
Wow.
with
Jeez.
babies. So, I think that in the 21st century, it's really going to be the baby selfie, and that probably needs its own name. Somebody out there can think of a nickname for that.
Yeah.
So obviously, since you're usually the bigger guy taking the selfie, do you have any advice for technique, for selfie taking technique? Have
Sure.
You,
Yeah.
have you refined that?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
getting better at it. I learned a lot from Vice President Biden when he was
Okay.
here.
Oh, yeah.
So seizing control of the camera as the candidate is a good move typically because I have longer arms so I can get more in view
Yeah.
and then can just kind of get everyone in a comfortable space. But yeah, I get down on one knee a lot.
Yeah.
I crouch a lot. There's always I can sort of spread out my legs to the side to drop a couple of inches.
Okay.
So whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But if it's babies, that's great because then I can bring them up to my level.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Joe Biden just now. How is it with this election, meeting all these like kind of great figures of government in recent years? Like, who was probably the coolest guy you got to meet during this process?
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, there are so many great ones. It's really hard to choose, but meeting the vice president was an incredible experience, and I'll never forget it. And just in addition to being such an accomplished public servant, both in the Senate and in the vice presidency, he's just a real family man. He reminded me a lot of my grandfather, and he gave me a lot of great advice, a lot of very personal advice. And the way he treats people, every single person he meets, he treats them with such dignity and respect that I just think that's what really stuck with me more than anything, more than any policy advice or anything. I think if you keep that in your heart always, we're all going to make some bad decisions every now and then. We'll be wrong about some things, but it's just really important to fight for the cops, the teachers, the firefighters, the military guys, the nurses, and that was what he kept emphasizing to me.
Now, I have to bring this back up again, but I remember online seeing a photo of you holding a lamb. So how did that happen?
Right. I told you we were reaching out to everyone that we could, trying to campaign over every inch of ground. And right there in Washington County, in the 18th Congressional District, is a great sheep farm called Ross Family Farms. It's multiple generations, and they sell a lot of wool that gets made into sweaters here locally, and they sell some lamb meat as well as other things in the local food economy. So they invited me to come out and look at their operation, and those pictures that you saw were actually of lambs that had been born the day before. So there were a lot of puns involved, and this lamb wasn't born yesterday and all that kind of thing. But it was really cool. And I would love to see more of the smaller family-owned farms start to do well in the economy. A lot of times they're crowded out by the big players, but just having been there, the care that these people take of their animals and of their land is really something we should build on going forward.
Yeah.
So back to more serious topic. Because
lambs are a very serious topic
Yeah.
to me. I just want you to know that.
all right.
Yeah.
Apologies. Deepest apologies to all lamb farmers or lamb family members.
Either one, yeah.
Both.
But yeah, both equally. So because you participated in a special election that was not during the regular election season, you almost have to jump right back into it again, I presume, for the midterms. So are you going to stick with the same idea mostly, like kind of you're laser focused on the certain ideas? Like, what's your plan there?
Right. Well, we're going to take the same approach, which is to try to go everywhere, listen to everybody, and invite everybody in.
Yeah.
And so you learn new things when you do that.
Yeah.
So I can't say that everything will be the exact same, because I hope that between now and November I learn a lot from the people that live here. But some of the same issues keep coming up time and time again. We all know that we need to fight for better jobs in this region and better jobs going forward, so that young people, when they're graduating from North Allegheny here, they've got some real options.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to go to a 2-year or 4-year college, great, do it. We have a lot of need for people with those degrees. But I also want people to feel like they can join the military out of here because they've had enough preparation in high school and physical fitness and that type of thing that they're ready. I want people to feel very comfortable joining a labor union out of high school and making money right away instead of going into debt right away. Because guess what? If you're in the military or you're in a labor union, you can still take college classes at night, a lot of times for free, and keep advancing toward your degree that way. But that means we need the jobs back here in Western Pennsylvania for people to fill when they get the right kind of training. And so whether it's at the new Shell plant going in Beaver County, or all the jobs that we expect to have in higher ed and the healthcare sectors here, or attracting new companies like Amazon, we have to be relentless in that focus on what the economy is going to look like for our generation going forward.
And then with the new election, you'll also be running in a new district, I believe, with the recent redistricting in Pennsylvania. That's been a hot topic. What are your feelings on your new district? Obviously, you're going to have new constituents and kind of encompassing a different area of Pennsylvania.
Right. I think a lot of the issues do overlap, but we had an incredible, army really of grassroots and volunteer supporters come out to help us cover the ground in the 18th. And I think we're going to do the same thing here. I think we're going to knock hundreds of thousands of doors again and make a lot of the same phone calls. I'm going to have the chance to do a lot of town halls and big meetings where people tell me about what's on their mind. And I think if we do that, we're going to see similar results to this last election, because people are really ready for change, and I think they're ready to have a representative of their own, not someone who has just signed on to somebody's boilerplate agenda that involves basically cutting taxes and trying to destroy the government while not accomplishing anything else. And so I look forward to doing that in the next several months.
Awesome.
All right, I just have one more fun thing to ask.
Sure.
What is your favorite type of music and favorite group?
Okay. So a lot of people don't know this about me, but I am a pretty big hip hop fan, particularly 90s East Coast, like a lot of the New York and Philadelphia groups. So my favorite group is probably, kind of have two answers here. So the Roots were my first love when it came to hip hop. I went to school in Philadelphia, where they're from. But during the campaign, I got to admit, I went really heavy into the Wu-Tang Clan. I think they're a better analogy for politics because they all were very independently skilled and identifiable artists who came together for a common cause and then kind of went their separate ways and came back. And that happens a lot in politics as well. So,
Interesting.
Would you be willing to give a demo of your skills?
No, I didn't say I was a skilled rapper. I'm definitely just a fan.
I think you
although
are.
I do quote them somewhat liberally. You know,
Okay.
when it comes to the roots, I like this one song. One of their early hits was called "What They Do." You know, and I thought about it a lot during this campaign because it's all about how, you know, we never do what they do. So when you see these, you know, cartoonish ads that they were running, there's a lot of good lines in that song, like, you know, frauds keep fronting. You want to be a man, then stand your own.
Yeah.
You got to be yourself and just run your playbook. And so, I think the Roots have certainly done that, and they've been successful. And of course, the Wu-Tang Clan did as well. So,
Yeah. Awesome.
how about you guys? Can I ask a couple questions? Or are we
Sure,
done?
we'd love to.
Sure.
Okay. What are the issues that come up every day in school? I mean, people talk about politics, I know, but what specifically?
Vaping is
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
really, really.
it's something that's
Big
really not
here.
talked about outside of the high school level, I feel like, but
Yeah.
I feel like personally there was kind of after the huge push to get rid of nicotine and like cigarettes and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
people kind of, it was uncool to smoke, it was uncool to like do that kind of drugs.
Right.
But now with the emergence of like electronic cigarettes,
Yep.
it's been so easy. People just go to the nearest gas station for only a few dozen dollars. You can have these electronic cigarettes that are just as strong as regular cigarettes, and people have been using them very liberally, like in the bathrooms, like sometimes even in class or whatever. And the school's done their best to really crack down on these, but they're really not talked about outside of the school
Yeah.
level about what we can
Right.
do to get students, I mean, as young as like 14 years old from getting hooked on nicotine.
Right. Yeah, that's a big concern of mine. You know, I understand people, you know, when they're young want to try different things, but I just think, you know, our country needs us. You know, and things like whether it's nicotine or alcohol or other kind of drugs, they ultimately can be distractions from whatever your main mission in life is, or if you want to really come alive. And as a military guy, I know I'm very concerned about the readiness of young people to go into the military if they want to. I mean, the stats are really bad on that. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but huge percentages of American youth right now are unqualified for the military because of their physical fitness, or they've got too many tattoos, or, you know, whatever it is. And so I just hope everybody watching this or listening to it will think a little bit about how much the country needs you. So I'm not saying you can never have fun, but let's be smart about it.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
So we'd like to thank you once again for coming here to North
Yeah, no,
Allegheny.
thank you. It's
Yep.
been a pleasure. Yeah.
And I hope that people of North Allegheny and whoever watches this really learns something about you and is more inspired in one direction or the other to go out and vote. in
Please
November.
register to vote. No matter who you want to vote for, no matter what your party is, people will not listen to the concerns of young people if you don't register to vote and turn out in every single election. And I know in this past election, there were a lot of young people that didn't show up and they weren't registered. So let's fix that.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nash.
Thank you, North Allegheny.
All right, guys. Great job.
That was awesome.
Thank you.